So, but let's see how we can combine these three. As I told you, how we can combine ADCS, then your petit bottom and anti-LM relay. So that's how the whole picture. If we see here, let's see that we are a attacker. Okay. So as an attacker, let's suppose our target system is the domain controller. Okay. And we have our certificate authority on the right side. Okay. So as an attacker, we can trigger the petit bottom vulnerability on the target, and then we can coerce the target to send their the domain controller to send their anti-LM authentication. Okay. Then we will take that on anti-LM authentication of the domain controller, and then we can ask the certificate authority to give us the certificate for the domain controller. And since we have the authentication of domain controller, the certificate authority thinks that the request is coming from a domain controller, and it will send the certificate of the domain controller. And once we have the certificate of the domain controller, since domain controller has DC sync rights, we can basically dump out all the credentials that are present in the domain. So that's how this attack actually works. So I also want to show you how it looks like in Wireshark logs. So let's go through it. Okay. So let's suppose that we have triggered the petit bottom vulnerability and how it looks like. So this 10.0.10.128 is our attacker system. So as an attacker system, as I told you, we are exploiting the EFS RPC protocol. Okay. So we are asking them to basically encrypt a file that we control. It's a fake file. This file should not be, it can be real, it cannot be. Okay, that doesn't matter. So we are asking that EF RPC protocol to perform some encryption operation on a data. Okay. And then basically that victim system, okay, will come to us asking for the data. At that time, we can send back a response that, hey, your session is expired. It means that we want their authentication, because that's why we want. So that's why you see in the first request, so the attacker machine is telling the domain controller to that hey, your session is expired. Can you please send me your anti-LM authentication so that you can resume your session. At that time, the domain controller, which is at 10.0.2 IP address, it will come to the attacker and it will initiate the negotiation authentication attempt. So if you can see here, now we can take that authentication attempt and we can just tell the CA that, hey, I want to authenticate. Okay. If that's the same thing happening here. If you see, the attacker machine is asking the certificate authority, which is at 10.0.3 IP address, and we are sending this is the HTTP web enrollment URL. Okay. And we will just send a request and it will send an unauthorized request. At that time, we can take the anti-LM, that negotiation request, and then we will send to your certificate authority. That's what happening here. If you see, this the attacker machine is sending here. The attacker machine is sending the negotiation message that it received from the domain controller to the certificate authority. Okay. And then now the certificate authority will send back a anti-LM challenge to the attacker machine. If you see here, that's what we're sending an anti-LM challenge. And now we will take that anti-LM challenge and then where we will send it to? We'll send it back to the domain controller. Okay. So that's what we are doing here. We are taking that anti-LM challenge and sending it back to the domain controller, and the domain controller is sending to our attacker machine the anti-LM authentication of DC01. Bank is the name of the domain, DC01 is the name of the domain controller. Now we have the anti-LM authentication of a domain controller. Now what we will do? Now the attacker machine will take the same anti-LM authentication of the domain controller and it will send back a request to the CA that, hey, I want a certificate, and this is the endpoint and this is the authentication of the domain controller. And if you see here, the last point, our certificate authority will send the certificate of the domain controller to the attacker machine. So this is how we can trigger petit bottom vulnerability to coerce anti-LM authentication. Then we can relay the anti-LM authentication to the domain controller and to the certificate authority. And then from the certificate authority, we can ask the certificate of the domain controller. And then we can use it for later attacks. Okay.